The old mansion and the first knock. In a narrow, winding alley of Old Anarkali in Lahore, there stood a centuries-old mansion. Its weathered brick walls held 1,000 secrets. This mansion was home to Daniyal, a painter and writer by profession, whose eyes always held a strange, distant longing. He was a man of deep contemplation, often spending hours watching the smoke curl away from his teacup, scribbling thoughts into his worn-out diary. The locals whispered that Daniyal harbored a storm of emotions in his heart, a storm too profound for ordinary minds to comprehend. One stormy evening, as a heavy monsoon downpour blanketed the historic city, a sudden knock echoed from the heavy, antique wooden door of the mansion. Daniyal pulled back the iron latch and opened it. Standing before him was a young woman. Her hair was drenched, clinging to her face, and her eyes trembled with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. "Greater than, can I stay here until the storm passes? It's treacherous outside," she asked, her voice shivering. "Greater than." Daniyal stepped aside in silence, gesturing for her to enter. The girl was Alizeh, the daughter of an immensely wealthy tycoon, who had fled the suffocating restrictions and emotional coldness of her world, seeking refuge in the chaotic, soulful streets of the old city. Daniyal had no idea that this single knock was the beginning of a madness that would redefine his entire existence. Silent conversations and the magic of colors. During that first night, hardly any words were exchanged. Alizeh sat quietly on a vintage sofa, sipping warm tea, while Daniyal returned to his easel, letting his brush glide across the canvas. Yet, within that silence, a profound connection was born. As the days blended into weeks, it became Alizeh's routine to escape her family's strict, suffocating household and seek solace in Daniyal's sanctuary. Daniyal would listen to her speak for hours. Whenever Alizeh laughed, it felt to Daniyal as if the lifeless, dull colors on his canvas had suddenly found a voice. An excerpt from Daniyal's diary. "Greater than, people say love happens at first sight. I say love is the light that awakens in a dark room at the mere sound of someone's approaching footsteps. Alizeh is that light for me, the one I have been searching for through lifetimes." Greater than. One afternoon, Alizeh noticed a fresh painting in the corner of the studio. It depicted a sorrowful girl standing in the dark, but her shadow was made of birds taking flight into the sun. Surprised, Alizeh asked, "Who is this?" Daniyal smiled softly and replied, "This is you, Alizeh. You look at yourself as a prisoner, but your soul is entirely free, just like those birds." The confession and the walls of society. Time flowed like a river, and Daniyal's affection deepened into an ocean of devotion. He anticipated Alizeh's every unsaid need. If she mentioned a headache, Daniyal would stay up all night writing poetry just to soothe her mind the next day. Well-wishers warned him, "Daniyal, you are losing your mind. She is the daughter of a billionaire, and you are just a penniless artist." But Daniyal had only one response: love does not look at status, it looks at the soul. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Lahore sky in vivid hues of crimson and gold, Daniyal gently took Alizeh's hand in his. "Alizeh, I do not know what the future holds, but I know that without you, I have no existence. I have become completely mad in your love." Tears welled up in Alizeh's eyes. She loved him with equal intensity, but she was acutely aware of her family's ruthlessness. Her father, Sikandar Khan, a ruthless businessman, would never accept an ordinary painter. "Daniyal, my love will destroy you," Alizeh wept. "If destruction is the price of your love, then I accept this ruin gladly," Daniyal replied, his resolve mirroring the legendary lovers Majnu and Ranja, the onset of the storm. When Alizeh's family discovered her secret visits, a storm of fury erupted. Sikandar Khan locked Alizeh in a secluded room, confiscated her phone, and deployed his henchmen to teach the artist a lesson. Late that night, several armed men stormed Daniyal's mansion. They slashed his canvases, smashed his pottery, and poured his bright paints across the floor before turning their violence on Daniyal. He was brutally beaten. "If you ever breathe her name again, we will ensure it's your last breath," the lead thug growled before leaving him for dead. Daniyal lay battered on the cold floor, his blood mixing with the spilled paints, creating an abstract tapestry of agony. Yet, a serene smile graced his lips. Dragging his wounded body, he used his own blood to write Alizeh across the floorboards. Physically broken, his spirit had become unbreakable. He was now, truly, the Mohabbat Ka Deewana, the wanderer in the wasteland. When news of the brutal assault reached Alizeh, her heart shattered. She resolved to rebel, but before she could act, her father arranged her forced marriage to her cousin and moved her to a heavily guarded, isolated farmhouse miles outside the city. Once Daniyal's wounds healed into scars, he walked away from his ancestral mansion. The city alleys felt too small for the magnitude of his grief. He set out on foot to find Alizeh. Turning into a wandering ascetic, he roamed from village to town. His hair grew wild, his clothes turned to rags, but his hands firmly held a diary and a charcoal sketch of Alizeh. When people saw him wandering aimlessly, children threw stones at him, mocking, "Look, the madman of love is passing by." Daniyal would pick up the stones, kiss them, and whisper, "Even these stones feel like they belong to the street where she walks." The evolution of Daniyal's devotion. Alizeh's captivity and the echo of love. Inside the heavily fortified farmhouse, Alizeh lived like a living corpse. Her wedding was only days away. She spent her days staring out the window at the passing clouds, wondering if Daniyal was even alive. One night, a soulful, heartbreaking melody echoed from outside the high walls of the estate. The voice was unmistakable. It was Daniyal, standing under the moonlight, dressed like a dervish. He sang a classic poem of yearning. Greater than, I seek the ultimate boundary of your love. Greater than, behold my innocence, look at what I desire. Greater than. Alizeh rushed to the window. Beneath the pale moonlight stood Daniyal. He was painfully thin and frail, but his eyes burned with the same eternal fire. Alizeh screamed his name, but the armed guards spotted him. They rushed out and began beating him mercilessly with batons. Yet, Daniyal didn't flinch or cry out. He kept his eyes locked onto Alizeh's window, smiling through the pain as if he were immune to physical suffering. The peak of madness. Realizing that physical violence would never break the boy's spirit, Sikandar Khan used his political influence to eliminate Daniyal permanently. He bribed the local police to throw Daniyal into a dark, maximum security prison cell on fabricated charges. In the pitch-black dungeon, Daniyal had no paintbrushes, no paper, and no colors. Undeterred, he scraped his fingertips against the rough stone walls until they bled, using his blood to draw portraits of Alizeh and write verses of their love story across the entire cell. Even the hardened prison warden wept upon witnessing this level of devotion. "Who are you, young man? Why are you bent on destroying your own youth?" the warden asked in awe. Daniyal replied softly, "I am the madman whose kingdom is love, and whose queen is Alizeh. Kingdoms of dust crumble, my lord, but true love never dies." Alizeh's ultimate choice. The night of the forced wedding arrived. Alizeh was adorned in a heavy, red bridal lehenga and priceless jewels, but her soul was trapped in the dark prison cell with Daniyal. She knew she could never allow another man to touch her. Doing so would profane the sacred madness of Daniyal's love. As the guests and family became distracted by the loud music and wedding rituals, Alizeh shattered her bedroom's glass window. Disregarding the sharp shards, she climbed out and ran into the dark, stormy night. Barefoot and weighted down by the heavy bridal dress, she fled down the deserted highway. Her feet bled profusely, but her mind was consumed only by Daniyal. She ran instinctively toward the old mansion in Anarkali, the only place where she had ever felt truly alive, hoping against hope that her lover would be waiting there. But she found only dust, silence, and shadows. The shrine of devotion. That very same night, a miracle occurred in the prison. Moved by a divine sympathy, the warden quietly unlocked Daniyal's cell door. "Run, Daniyal, go find your love before time runs out completely," the warden whispered, turning a blind eye. Daniyal ran like the wind through the pouring rain. His heart pulled him like a compass toward his old mansion, instinctively knowing that Alizeh would seek out their sanctuary. When Daniyal sprinted into the courtyard, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, in the center of the courtyard, sat Alizeh in her crimson bridal attire, her head resting gently against the very easel where Daniyal used to paint her. Daniyal rushed forward, throwing himself beside her, screaming, "Alizeh! Look at me, I am here." Alizeh slowly fluttered her eyes open. A beautiful, serene smile washed over her face. She was completely exhausted, and an empty vial of poison slipped from her numb fingers onto the floor. "Daniyal, you came," she whispered, her voice fading. "I knew my madman would break through the world for me." Daniyal cradled her in his arms, tears finally streaming down his face. "Why did you do this, Alizeh? I survived everything just to live for you. Daniyal, this world would never let us be together." Alizeh breathed her final words, her eyes gazing into his. "We will meet now in a place where society cannot reach us." With a final sigh, her eyes closed forever. Immortal love. After Alizeh drew her last breath, Daniyal did not scream, nor did he weep. A profound, unnatural silence enveloped him. He tenderly lifted her body and buried her right there, In the center of the courtyard, under the open sky, at the exact spot where she had stood drenched in the rain during their very first meeting. Daniyal never left the mansion again. He sat by her grave day and night, pouring his remaining life force onto a single, final canvas. A few years later, the locals broke into the silent mansion and found Daniyal lying lifeless over Alizeh's grave. In his rigid, cold hand, he held his final masterpiece, a painting of himself and Alizeh, holding hands, smiling beautifully as they walked beyond the clouds into eternity. Today, the residents of Old Anarkali call that abandoned place, the mansion of the mad lover. The elders say that whenever a fierce monsoon storm hits Lahore, the faint sound of an artist's soft laughter and the phantom chime of bridal anklets echo from within the walls. Daniyal's madness elevated their love to a realm where time, death, and human cruelty could never touch them again. He died to become immortal, and the world forever remembered him as Mohabbat Ka Deewana.